to the Sportsline Podcast, and we certainly appreciate you hanging out with us. I'm Bubba O'Neill. Well, our spotlight is always the best in sports from Southern Ontario, and we also love to feature those who have made an impact on our sports viewing habits, and for folks like me, it's an addiction. Today, one of the best in the business on both sides of the border. Not sure if this native of Greenwich, Connecticut, who graduated with a degree in communications from Baylor University, knew during those days what an incredible impact he would make in the television sports business. From his local broadcasting days in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and Binghamton, upstate New York, Trey Wingo would set an outstanding standard for 24 years at ESPN, known to most as the worldwide leader in sports. Yet, an ability to call his own shot came calling, and he took it. Currently, he's the host of a new show on the DraftKings Network, the Pregame PowerUp. Let's bring in Trey Wingo. And I'll tell you, we really appreciate you joining us there, partner. It's a good time for us to chat with you. First of all, how are you?
Doing great, Bubba. Great to be with you. And thank you for that. That was very kind.
Hey, the Pregame PowerUp, what's this all about?
Basically, it's just another way to get you set to watch football, much in the same way that Canada's addicted to hockey. We here in the United States are addicted to the NFL, and DraftKings has put together a really great network of content. And one of the new things they added this year was the Pregame PowerUp, getting you ready for the Monday and Thursday night games, 6 o'clock Eastern on DraftKings Network. You can get it through a variety of ways, and also on our YouTube channel and the fast channels that carry us, Roku, all this kind of stuff, Samsung Plus. And we basically break down the Monday and Thursday night games, get you set for everything you need to know, and just talk football, which is what I've been doing for most of my career, which is a lot of fun.
Well, when you talk about it, are you looking at it from an analytical side? Is there sort of the betting aspect that, has become so popular over the years?
Well, absolutely. We try and do both. And the video you're showing now is of Claudia Bellafato, who does a great job doing a lot of the betting content for us and setting that stuff up. We want to help you get set up to know what to expect in the game, things you might be looking at that might be interesting, and make sure you get your fantasy lineup set as well based on what we're talking about. So we try and cover the actual game itself, plus all the interesting ways you can get in on a little action on the game as well.
You and I are very close in age, and we can look at sports from a different time. I'll say that. Did you ever think that where we are right now in terms of, your fantasy aspect, your wagering aspect, that would it ever get to where it is right now? It's booming.
It's crazy. Look, I'm old enough on a lot of levels to remember not too long ago when Tony Romo wanted to hold a fantasy football convention in a hotel in Las Vegas when he was still the head quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys. And the NFL said, you're not doing that because there's a casino in that hotel. Well, just a few years later, we have a team in Las Vegas, the Raiders. We've had a draft in Las Vegas, and we just come off the first Super Bowl in Las Vegas. So things have definitely changed very quickly. The NFL is really good at two things: keeping our attention and making money. And once the laws in this country changed about where and when you can bet, it was just a matter of time before all of this was embraced.
Well, very much like what we do here in Canada, we've always follow your lead in the United States, and it's wide open right now. Single game betting is a thing right now. I think those days of it kind of being that dark conversation amongst people it's wide open right now. You can go to any corner store and sign up and put down a little money on a game right now, and I think it's become regular in our lives right now.
It is, and it's interesting. Like, people need to understand what the line was to begin with in a game. Well, they're favored by 3.5. They're a 7-point underdog. That was never about we expect that team to win by that much. That line was set to figure out how you're going to get the most money bet on both sides. Right? That's what that number is. The number is, what number can the sharps at DraftKings Sportsbook and everybody else put out that will give us the most action on both sides of that number. So that's what that is. And the NFL, whether they wanted to admit it or not, has always been involved with this business because they put out the injury reports every Wednesday and Friday. Well, why do they put out the injury reports? Why do you want to tell every other team who's injured? Because you don't want that information to be proprietary to some and not to everybody. So somebody would have an inside scoop about someone who may or may not play, and then they might be able to make a wager based based on that information that nobody else has had. So that's why the injury reports have always existed in the NFL, for that very specific reason, to make sure that everybody knows what everybody knows.
I'll tell you that exactly. I mean, those things have been there for so many people. And I know there's even people on the inside that have been telling me that this is the way it is. Now, let's go back a little bit there, Trey. I need to just fill out the card here a little bit. You've obviously had, like myself, broadcasting dreams. It's been a journey for you. I talked about Allentown and Binghamton, St. Louis, ESPN. When you were in Baylor, did you think you would be where you are today?
Well, it was interesting. I went to Baylor with the idea of that was going to be the case, and then I changed my major like 5 times. I would say that my collegiate experience was far more social than it was career-oriented, and I'm comfortable saying that. It's funny. I actually, right out of college, I decided I don't want to work in this industry. You know, you work nights and weekends and holidays and all this kind of stuff. So I got an office job somewhere, and I really learned out very quickly how much I hated an office job. So I quit that after a few months, and then moved back home into my parents' basement and tried to get my broadcasting career going. So yeah, the initial idea when I went to college was to go there. Then I took a 4.5-year hiatus from that plan, and then I realized if you don't follow your dreams, at least give them a shot. You'll regret it the rest of your life. And failure doesn't kill anybody. Regret does. Everybody fails. Everybody's going to do some things that don't work out. And if it didn't work out, that's fine. But I had to try. And if you don't try, I think that will eat you up more than taking a swing and then say, hey, I took my shot. It didn't work out. But if you didn't put yourself in the batter's box, I think that would have really been detrimental to me.
Well, like so many of us in this business, you start out in those small markets, kind of grinding it out a little bit, and then the opportunity to go to what was, I would say at the time, a very young ESPN back in the day, just kind of finding its footing within the sort of cable TV world. What was that like in those days?
Well, you know, it's interesting. I grew up in Connecticut. So ESPN was based in Bristol, Connecticut. I grew up in a little town called Greenwich, just outside New York City. And I remember when ESPN first came on, I'm like, what the hell is this? Well, what am I watching? 24-hour 7 sports? What are you, crazy? But then it started to take off. And when I was in college in the mid 80s, that's sort of when it all really sort of blossomed. And for me, that was sort of the idea of, well, maybe I could work at this network and go home and be close to my friends and family. So that became a goal that I wanted to achieve and someplace that I wanted to get to. And that sort of was all I ever really wanted to do, was sort of do that and sort of be there. And I was lucky and fortunate enough to be there doing all these wonderful things you're showing now, whether it was NFL Live or Golic and Wingo and doing the draft and all that stuff. Was a lot of fun. It was really a great joy to be there in what a lot of people consider to be sort of the golden era, for lack of a better term, of ESPN, because it's a very different dynamic now, and the industry changes very quickly, and we all know this. But it was fun to be there at that time. It was a really heady time to be a part of it.
Was there I'll call it an aha moment. Obviously, at ESPN, there are standards. There are an ability to talk to different athletes that most people would never have that opportunity or shot to. You hosted NFL. I mean, you hosted the draft. Things that, again, people are looking at and saying, Trey Wingo is a big deal, But was there a moment ever where you're like, holy mackerel, I can't believe what I'm doing here?
There were a couple of them. When we started NFL Live, it was a half-hour show on ESPN2 with no set time frame, Tuesday through Saturday. In other words, at that point, all the times where there weren't football games. So they just sort of threw us around the schedule where they could fit us in. And we turned that into an hour show, Monday through Friday, 4 o'clock Eastern on ESPN. That was something I was super proud of. There's a couple other moments for sure that will always stick out with me. The COVID draft in 2020, where there was nothing going on in the world. And, we were going to do that draft in Las Vegas. And within 45 days of that happening, the entire world shut down and we had to do it from Bristol. So I was in the studio by myself. There were no other analysts next to me. And we had to combine our resources with the NFL Network because the studios in California were a hard shutdown. They wouldn't let people go in. So it was just me and 6 monitors, and we did it for 3 days. And it was amazing that it went off without a hitch. We set the record that's going to go down in history as the highest watched draft of all time. So that obviously is a big part of it. The other thing, I got to be careful the way I say this, in a sort of a weird way, was the week after 9/11. No one knew what the heck was going on. The world was changing around us very quickly, and Bob Lee and I were the only people that hosted SportsCenter for that entire week. And that was a very profound week. That was a week that I'll never forget, rather, for a lot of different reasons. And you don't want to say it was a fun thing to do, but it was certainly something that affected me deeply, and I was very proud to be a part of that with my then colleague, Bob Lee.
You talk about Bob, and I could just list off the number of people that you worked with. I mean, you obviously know this as well as anyone. And I know for myself, working at a national sports network, it was an interesting dynamic because as opposed to the station that I'm at right now, which is news, sports, and weather, and sometimes sports is like third on the list, when you're at a national sports network, it's sports all the time, with everybody, whether it's the editors, whether it's the producers, the directors, the graphics designers, they are sports minded. For you working in an environment like that, like how gifted did you feel, and what kind of relationships did you build with the particular talent that you worked alongside with?
Well, it's interesting. I think it presented a challenge, a daily challenge to bring your best. Because one of the news editors at one time said, we got a lot of show ponies in the stable. So there was this sense of competition all the time that you had to be on your A game and bring it and make sure that you were as sharp as you could be. You mentioned relationships. ESPN at that time was so big. I mean, the campus was like an international airline terminal. People were coming in from literally all over the world. And unless you were on the same schedule as somebody, you could go months, sometimes years, without seeing another person that people would say you run into all the time. When I was doing the morning show, I would only see guys people that were working before 11 o'clock. And then when you did the 1 a.m. Sports Center, you would only see people who came in after 6 o'clock, and so your friends sort of became the people that you worked with on a daily basis. And since the most of my time, 15 of those 24 years, were spent doing NFL Live, those guys that I worked with on a daily basis, and some of them you saw in some of that video you just put up, whether it was Mark Schlereth or Mike Golick or Merrill Hodge or Darren Woodson or Tim Hasselbeck, all those guys, Damian Woody, Teddy Bruschi, Herm Edwards, those are the guys, Jeff Saturday, those are the guys that are still my friends to this day because we spent so much time together every day doing the shows. And then those are the people that I still talk to on a regular basis.
The business is changing, and this is news, sports, everything is changing in media. Newspaper, radio, television. I don't even know where we're going to be 20 years from now. I don't think anyone does, quite honestly. I think we're all just trying to adjust and make our own personal adjustments in our lives. But you do something different. You are at ESPN. We have been boasting about it and what a wonderful place it was, and that it was the pinnacle of sports in North America. But you take a risk. And you talk about taking risks in the business and willing to fail. And you talked about it earlier. And you've kind of gone out and done your own thing. That decision, why?
I think we're always looking for the next thing and the new challenge. And, I'd talked to people my last few years at ESPN, and it just felt like, well, I could, we're just doing this again. And it was a lot of fun, but you want to try and do something new. You want to try and do something different. And, I could point to various instances in my life where I decided to take an unconventional route to something, and it always worked out. And I'll give you a really brief example. One of the first jobs I ever got in the business was a page at NBC at 30 Rockefeller in New York, the studios there at 30 Rock, Rockefeller Plaza, right on 6th Avenue. And I was a page. I was giving guided tours of the building, working the door for the David Letterman show, and just, silly stuff. We're selling Christmas stuff in the NBC store. And I got an opportunity to work with a company called IMG, International Management Group. And it was run by a guy named Mark McCormick, who founded the business. He created sports marketing. He's very famous for the 2 books he wrote, What They Don't Teach You at the Harvard Business School. But he created sports marketing, essentially. His first 2 clients were Jack Nicklaus and Arnold Palmer. And he created an industry about marketing and getting businesses to buy into having these guys be endorsing their products and all that kind of stuff. And I was making no money at the time. And he offered me a job. So I'm making, I'm seating people and wearing a blue blazer at 30 Rock. And he's offering me this job to go over to Wimbledon and work there and do all this kind of stuff. And he handed me this business card, still the greatest business card I've ever seen. IMG offices, New York, Paris, London, Stade, Cleveland, Los Angeles, Rome, Rio, everywhere. And I said, okay, but I haven't tried this thing that I really wanted to do, the sportscasting thing. So he offered me the job, and I called him the next day, and I turned him down. And I think I might be the only guy that ever said no to Mark McCormick. The reason I bring up this story is fast forward to 2008. This was in the late 80s when he offered me the job. I'd been at ESPN for a while. Things were going okay. And I got a call from a guy named Sandy Montag, who, if you know anything in the business, he was one of the biggest agents in the world. And he worked for IMG. And he said, hey, we really like you. I don't know who reps you, but we want to rep you. And so I turned down working for IMG to follow my passion, which was doing what I did for all those years. And it turns out because I did that, instead of me working for IMG started working for me. So to your point about that, sometimes you got to say, screw it, and take your best shot and change things up a little bit.
We all got one life to live, so you might as well take that shot. That's for sure. You want to talk some football?
Let's do it.
I go back, as I said, we're kind of similar ages, and I go back to when I talk about locally, obviously we're close to the border here, 2 towns in Detroit and Buffalo, and of course we're real close to Buffalo. And as a child, I grow up watching Joe Ferguson and Joe Cribbs, the Talking Proud era, and I've been disappointed ever since. But I keep coming back every Sunday and Monday night. Where are they right now in terms of the hierarchy? You believe the Buffalo Bills in contention for a Super Bowl?
Well, they're very good. And Josh Allen is off to the best start of his career. Going back to the end of last year, he's gone 8 straight games without throwing an interception. That's the longest stretch of his entire career. And that's important to note that because from 2018 through 2023, 78 total turnovers. Nobody had more turnovers than Josh Allen. Here's my concern for Buffalo. So far this season, they're defined by who they play. They're 5-0 against teams under 500 and 0-2 against teams that have winning records. My other concern for Buffalo is not necessarily the players on the field, but the coaching staff. And the reason I say this, and I want to be clear, Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane, the GM, have done an amazing job of building back this franchise to where it was, in the early 90s when they went to 4 straight Super Bowls. But I find them making curious decisions at really bad times. Let's just go back a couple weeks ago to the game against the Texans. It's 2020. You are inside your own 5-yard line with less than half a minute to play. Your quarterback, Josh Allen, ended up being 9 of 30 in that game. And let's not dwell on 9 of 30. It's really hard to be that inaccurate in an NFL game these days, okay? So your decision is, in a tie game, under 31 seconds left, hey, let's throw it 3 times. Well, they incomplete all 3 times. 2 of them could have been intercepted. And so they have to punt it back to the Texans, who have not had to burn any of their timeouts because they didn't run the ball. And they're able to get 1 play off before the end of the game. They call a timeout, and they kick a 59-yard field goal to win it. That was just bad management. That was bad game management, clock management, bad play calling, okay? If we're going to go back to the divisional game against the Chiefs last year, it's in the fourth quarter, and it's a 4th and 5 from inside your own 35-yard line. Well, they go for the fake punt. It's stopped. And if Mecole Hardman doesn't fumble the ball out of the end zone on the touchback, the Chiefs probably win that game by 10 or 14 instead of 7 points. That was a bad decision by Sean McDermott. And we have to go back to 2021, the divisional game, arguably the greatest playoff game in the history of the NFL. 13 seconds. Chiefs-Bills. 13 seconds. Gabe Davis is thrown a strike. The backup safety for the Chiefs fell down, wide ass open in the end zone. 13 seconds, you score. They kick it out of the back of the end zone. For what possible reason? Squib it. Then the Chiefs don't have 2 plays to kick the game-tying field goal and eventually win the game in overtime. It's a long way of saying I think Buffalo is very talented, but when push comes to shove, I have real concerns about whether or not they'll make the right game decisions in critical moments to get it done.
You know, I've been saying that for some time. It's been actually a local conversation. I mean, we get all the Buffalo channels on radio, and it's been a conversation for about 3 years now. And I just keep finding myself, when these kind of things come up, I'm like, okay, you're a William and Mary kind of guy. Like, you should be pretty smart. I know you're not Marv, like a Harvard grad, but come on, you got to know better. Yeah. And I give him respect because he takes the responsibility and say, look, I got to be better. But it's always after the incident, right? It's always after the loss. Yeah. So,
well, the other thing is, let's be honest about it. They'll go into Arrowhead and beat Kansas City almost every year. Yeah. Right? They do it all the time. Then what happens in the playoffs? Whether it's Arrowhead or whether it's in Buffalo, it's a different dynamic. I think the Chiefs live rent-free in the Bills' head.
Good point. I mean, they got them coming up, I think, on November 17th. So we'll see what happens there. Now, sticking on Kansas City right now, I mean, I had a couple of guys on the show just a couple of weeks ago, and I guess at that time they were 4-0. And the word was, at least from, my guess here, is that they were the most fraudulent 4-0 team that they had seen in some time. Yet, we look at this guy, number 15, and I don't think he has been as spectacular as we've seen in some years yet. Trey, he keeps winning. Why?
Yeah. Well, because he's the coldest MFer I've ever seen in my life. All right, that's the easiest way to describe it. And you're watching this play, a 33-yard run, the longest of his career. He just knows how to win games. Okay. Now, I'm a big believer that teams win games, let me rephrase that. He knows how to put his team in a position to win games. I love they trucked that little cornerback there at the goal line, who was the rookie who was hitting people all game long. He can play an ugly game and make the plays necessary to win. Okay, whether it was against the Chargers that got him to 4-0, that was a game they lost Rashee Rice. Okay. But against a very good Chargers defense, they were backed up in a 1-score game. A first down wins the game. What do? They get the first down. Go back to the AFC Championship game last year in Baltimore. They got off to a great start. Then the offense was really stagnant in the second half. When they needed one first down to win the game and go back to the Super Bowl, what did they get? They got the first down on a 17-yard strike to, of all people, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, who had stones for hands the entire year. He makes that catch, and that seals the game. Go back to the game against against San Francisco. They don't have Rashee Rice. They don't have Hollywood Brown. They lose Juju Smith-Schuster. They have no wide receivers. They have essentially no wide receivers in the game. Fine. We'll just pound that rock right up there, and we'll do what's necessary to win the game. The Chiefs know how to win. And you can call people, not you, people on your show can call them fraudulent. That's fine. They haven't lost since December. Okay. And wow. I don't think they're losing this Sunday either. And they just picked up DeAndre Hopkins. Bet against the Chiefs at your own peril, because they are the modern day version of the New England Patriots. People look at the Patriots and they always focus in on the 2007 season when Bill Belichick was doing his double middle fingers to the NFL for the Spygate situation. They didn't win the Super Bowl that year. When they were winning their Super Bowls, whether it was Super Bowl 36, Super Bowl 38, Super Bowl 39, Super Bowl 49, Super Bowl 51, they did what was necessary. It wasn't always pretty. They've only had one Super Bowl of those 6 that was more than a 1-score victory. It was the game against the Rams in Super Bowl 53 when they won 13-3, a 10-point margin. And that was only a 10-point margin because the Rams missed a kick at the end that would have allowed them to have an onside kick to potentially tie the game. They found a way to win. It wasn't always pretty. It wasn't always flashy. But when it was, for lack of a better term, nut-cutting time to make a play, they made a play. That's who the Chiefs are.
You brought up DeAndre Hopkins, and it's funny because the Bills just played the Titans. And I had to go look because I thought, I'll be honest, I forgot about DeAndre Hopkins. And I looked in that game, and he had 1 target, no receptions. I was like, okay, whatever happened to him? And now the Chiefs have picked him up, and I'm wondering, 32 years old, 12 years in the league, kind of been with a kind of loser team for a couple of years. Does he still got anything to offer?
I think he does, but I think he's going to be in a different role. You're looking at these clips of them playing him on the outside. I think the Chiefs are going to use him in the slot. I think they're going to put Xavier Worthy as the outside receiver and going to use DeAndre in the slot because he's not as fast as he once was. But at 32, he can still beat linebackers and safeties and your third corner without question. And I think that's the way they're going to try and use him and exploit him. And I think that he's going to be, look, literally, they need bodies, okay? Like Juju is out this week, again, with that hamstring, and Sky Moore was just put on injured reserve, even though that doesn't really matter because Sky Moore has not caught a cold, let alone a pass, since he was drafted by Kansas City. So it's going to be a lot of Xavier Worthy, Mecole Hardman, and DeAndre Hopkins, and you'll watch those two tight ends, Noah Gray and Travis Kelce. And I think if you put DeAndre on the slot, it's going to open things up for Travis as well. So I think he's going to be a really good fit for Kansas City.
Game of the week last week was probably the Vikings and the Lions. They're now 5-1, and they beat the Vikings, ending their undefeated run. There's a lot of talk about them being the best team in the National Football League, and they got the Titans this week. I would expect them to move to 6-1. Trey, are they the best team in the National Football League?
They're the best team in the NFC, for sure, in my opinion. And to me, there are three teams that really know who they are and know what their culture is. And those three are the Kansas City Chiefs, the Baltimore Ravens, and the Detroit Lions. I mean, the way that team feeds off their head coach and the respect he has from his players is truly remarkable. And Jared Goff is not talked about enough in the MVP discussion here, but I'm just going to give you some numbers. Jared Goff has had 4 straight games where he's completed at least 80% of his passes and had a passer rating of 140 or better. Now, that's an arbitrary number, right? Because the passer rating is 158.3 is perfect, which makes no damn sense whatsoever, which is why back at ESPN, they developed this thing called QBR, 0 to 100. It makes it a little easier to understand. Why do I bring that up? In the entire history of the NFL, since the AFL-NFL merger of 1970, here's the number of quarterbacks that have had 4 straight games that have completed 80% of their passes and had a passer rating of 140 or better. Jared Goff. End of list. That's how well he's playing.
Wow.
So I think that Jared is absolutely in contention at this point as a front runner for the MVP. And I love the way the Lions are built. They can win over the top. They have 2 running backs that can get after you. And their defense, even with the loss of Aiden Hutchinson, got a lot of pressure on Sam Darnold last week.
Can I throw this at you? And you talked about the head coach, and it is clear they love him. But he makes what I call Madden decisions.
Yeah, that's fair.
And I think that was a big reason why they stumbled in San Francisco last year. And I
100% agree with you.
And I wonder if he can get that out of himself. And I wonder about that. And then he goes for it on 4th down from their own 28 or whatever it was this week. And now they got away with it, and but they blew a couple of leads. So I always wonder if that is their sort of kryptonite. I just don't know. Even for a guy that people love.
I think that's a very fair assessment. And I said it at the time, especially when they had a 17-point lead on the road in San Francisco at halftime, right? So then the Niners go down and score in their first drive. And then instead of kicking, I think would have been a 40-plus yard field goal, I'm going to say 40 to 45 yards. It was in that range. I think that Dan would have done his team a bigger service had he kicked that field goal and settled his team down, because then he would have said, okay, hey, they just scored, but we just scored, so we're back to a 17-point lead. We're good. And I hope he learns from those mistakes, because I do believe, I'm with you, I think he cost him the game. And the one thing I hate is a team that says, well, that's our identity. That's who we are. No, who you are should be whatever it takes to win the game. And that's usually what happens in New England. That's what's happening in Kansas City. And I think that's who you need to be.
Trey Wingo, this has been unbelievable talking football with you. Again, from someone that's been in the business, that is in the business, and has been an ability to watch you and your career and see what you're doing right now. Obviously, Pregame PowerUp is what you're up to right now. We can see you on DraftKings. I'll be spreading the word. Looking forward to what you're doing. Thank you so much for joining us. And again, you know where I am, so come find us whenever you need us. If you do want to ever talk a little CFL, the Grey Cup's coming up. All right, go Hamilton Tiger Cats, even though we're not going to the playoffs.
Come on.
All right,
anytime.
Thanks for joining us, partner. Appreciate it.
Take care.
Hey, that's a Sportsline podcast for the day. And as you've just seen and heard, we love talking sports. If you do know of an athlete, team, or event to promote the Sportsline podcast, you want to hear from you. Please hit the thumbs up, like, and subscribe button. And if you have something to say, please comment. For the wonderful people that make the Sportsline podcast possible, thank you so very much. And we'll see you tomorrow.